All right. Welcome back, everyone. If you haven't already, make sure that you're watching the syllabus video that came before this one that gives you the overview of the course, what's expected, that sort of thing. Today, this video will be fairly brief. This is just the first part of the course that we're going to cover chapters 1 and 2. And this is vital because it's going to sort of set the stage, excuse me, for the entirety of the course. So what you'll see there is that this theme for the class is think nationally, act practically. So as you can read it, the idea is that America is in a less than ideal spot, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. I think we can all agree that we could be doing a lot better. So what I want you to do is to think about how you can make a change. And I realize that, being a college student with, not a ton of experience in these sort of issues, you don't have a degree yet, maybe you don't have a job yet that's, that you feel is important or impactful, you can still be an agent of change. And part of public speaking is using your voice to make that change. So the theme for the class that I want you to sort of follow is that you are going to choose a topic or a theme of your own that is it's an issue that's facing our country. And I want you to think about what it is and why it's an issue, why it became an issue, and inform us on that for your first major speech. And then for your persuasives, I want you to tell us what you can do about that same issue, and what we, more importantly, can do with you about that issue, and what we can do at Grand Valley. So again, your speeches will focus on a national problem and a response that we can have that starts with us on campus. Now, if you're having trouble thinking about this in terms of what topic to choose, there's not a shortage. Trust me. You have a lot of options. I mean, the questions that I ask you there: what do you care about, or what gives you a visceral reaction? In other words, what, when you think about it, makes you have an emotion? It makes you sad, it makes you angry, it makes you laugh. What is it? And that's a good indicator that that's a topic you can live with for the entirety of the semester, because once you choose your topic for this class, your speeches will all be on that same topic. That's designed to help you, because that way, you're not constantly learning new information about a new topic. You're building off of what you learn as you go. And also, it's going to be something that you're going to need to live with throughout the semester. So don't pick something just randomly at the last minute because it checks the box, but instead make sure that it's something you're going to be able to be okay with working on for an entire semester. Now, what I've got on here as a note is don't use COVID as a direct topic. There's just, so much more for us to know about that. But you can use things that are connected to COVID. So, for example, what we're learning, say in education, as you see the example there, is that most things are moving online or have already moved online, staying online. And that seems okay for a lot of folks. But when it seems okay, that could be a reminder of the privilege that many of us have. For some folks, not going to college in person means not going to college because they don't have access to either the equipment needed to do it online or the high speed internet that you need to have to do it online. There's a gap in our country, and that gap is an issue that COVID is exposing in a way that we've not really maybe thought of it before, at least to a larger degree. So you can use something related to that, or again, any other topic that you see as an issue in our country. When you think controversial issue, by the way, think an issue with two different sides at least. There's usually more than two sides. But if you can at least think of a two-sided issue, that's fine. It doesn't need to be, although it can be, extremely controversial in a traditional sense of, people are fighting and dying over it. God forbid. I've got some quotations on here because what I hear a lot of students say is just this, like, I don't care about politics. Well, everything is political. The personal is political. Every decision that's made in politics affects you on some level. Other people will say, well, I'm just one person, so what's the point? Why should I try? JFK said one person can make a difference and everyone should try. I've heard people say things like it's impossible to change a system that is so big. Nelson Mandela told us that everything seems impossible until it's done. Other folks may say things like, you must be dreaming if you think that's going to happen. Come on, not in this lifetime. Harriet Tubman said that each dream begins with a dreamer. That could be you. Other folks say now's not the time. I'm young. I can't really do much. I'm going to wait until I'm established and have a job and I have some position in the world. Martin Luther King Jr. told us that it's always the right time to do what's right. And then last, you'll hear people say things like, I don't like this, but it's not my place to change it. And they'll end up just staying quiet. And they don't like it. They just remain quiet and they stay silent. And Leonard Peltier said, silence, they say, is the voice of complicity, but silence is impossible. Silence screams. And I think that's so important as we talk about speech, that silence is just as loud or louder than someone standing on their soapbox yelling at an audience. When we don't speak up, we give our tacit agreement. We're saying that's okay. Someone tells a sexist or a racist joke and you don't laugh at it, good, but you don't say anything either. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the difference. We're learning that with the Black Lives Matter movement, that anymore it's not enough to be not racist. It's important that we're actively anti-racist and that we take stands against racism instead of just saying, well, I don't use particular words or I don't discriminate in my thoughts or actions. That's great. It's wonderful, but it's not taking a proactive role. And that's what silence does for us. And it gets us to a place like where we are with enough rough things going on in the country to have a class where the theme is fixing some of those things. So you'll see the note on what we can do there at the end here at Grand Valley. So to just recap this briefly, pick a topic, an issue that you see that's going wrong in our country. For your first speech, you're informative. You're going to tell us what is going on. Give us the background of the situation. And then third, for your two persuasives, you'll tell us how you can fix it and how we can help. Now, the second chapter, and this is again very brief also, really gets at why you're taking public speaking as a course. I know that, again, as I said in the first video, many of you are only here because you have to be. And I get that. I don't think less of you. I can only imagine if biology, I don't know, some advanced molecular biology was a required course, how I would feel when I had to sit through that. But, again, I want you to get something useful from the course. And, when you think about why you take it, to me, the reason why you take it is because we want you to be an empowered speaker. And that seems like a buzzword right now. You'll hear lots of people talking about, we have to empower people to do the thing. Well, you need to feel empowered to stand up for the thing. Well, I understand the use of the word, but a lot of folks can't define empowerment. And what I've learned from my own research is that it's defined a lot of different ways depending on the context in which it's used. And no one had really defined it for public speaking until some great scholar, it was me, did it a few years ago and published it. So I came up with the Brown Public Speaking Empowerment Scale, and you can see that down below. But basically what I found was public speaking empowerment is made up of three key factors. And that's your confidence. So I want you to feel an increased feeling of success, a little less fear, and being poised when you give a speech. The second factor is influence, or at least your perceived ability to influence other people and change their attitudes, beliefs, values, behaviors. And then last, I want you to have an increased sense of personal agency when it comes to speaking. In other words, an ability to use your voice comes through confidence in your felt ability to influence, but the willingness to use your voice will come through this personal agency. And as you practice and you learn how to do speech, how to write and deliver an effective presentation, I hope that you will be more willing to stand up and say something when the time is right. As I said in the first video, I don't expect or really want everyone to just start speaking about every topic that's out there. You have to pick our battles. We talked about silence being the voice of complicity, sure, but when you do speak up, I want you to not only feel like you're confident, but to really know what you're talking about, to be able to do that background research, to be able to structure things in a way that is clear and it adds to your credibility. So make sure that you're thinking about how this can affect you later in life. But we want you to be more empowered and a little less nervous, which we'll talk about in another video. So, beyond empowerment, why speech class? Well, here's some reasons. One is that humans are storytellers. We're natural storytellers. Before we had written word, we had spoken word. People would get together and tell stories about anything from their day, their experiences, to their ancestors, to their beliefs about creation, or the origin of humans. And while we now learn a lot differently, we still hold on to that element of oral communication and storytelling. When we teach children things, we'll often give them a story. You know this. I mean, The Little Engine That Could, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, you name it. There's tons of examples of those. Parables, teaching lessons from stories. This is actually something that, again, is back to cave people days, if you will, the first humanoids. But we can really trace public speaking back to the ancient Egyptians, and then it was refined by the Greeks and Romans. In more recent history, we can see that this public speaking is not only educational in its own way, but that it is powerful. We'll talk about that next, but think about people who've used this for good or not so good. I mean, like Hitler, on one hand, was a very effective speaker, and that's where I will cut off with any compliments there, because that's all that needs to be and deserves to be said. Terrible human being, but an effective speaker. He was able to use words to manipulate people through speech, and I use that word very purposefully. Manipulate people and stoke fear and acts of violence. I mean, terrible things, like the Holocaust. But that came through a series of speeches. It wasn't like when Hitler came to power, the German people were just killers waiting for a victim, and he just introduced them to their victims. He was able to take a largely peaceful people, peaceful but unhappy, economically strained, give them a scapegoat. Here's a group that is causing your problems, and then turn them so far against that group that they would act in violence. I won't make too many comparisons directly to Hitler, because that's almost always a mistake, but we've already seen this start with the 17-year-old shooter. Now, people that use it for good, you've got MLK, right? I mean, changing the world. He was killed for his use of words to change the world, but he was able to use words in an opposite way of Hitler, right? He used words to empower, inspire those seeking social change, and he accomplished social change. I mean, have no doubt, the 1964 Civil Rights and Voting Act, that was a direct result of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work, and he did it advocating nonviolence. I mean, that was the big difference between him and Malcolm X. Well, there's a lot of differences, but the big surface difference in approach, maybe methodical difference, would be this nonviolent ideology. And so words can change the world. They do. If you think about great speakers in leadership, we have people like President Obama. Again, whether you like him or not, as a speech expert, I'm going to tell you he's the best speaking president that we have a recording of. I don't know, maybe Thomas Jefferson was better, or whoever, but we don't have a recording of them speaking. Mr. Obama is an amazing speaker. I've had the chance to see him in person, and I'll tell you more about that as we go into the anxiety chapter. But then you've got other folks who maybe aren't so skilled. Now, I'll use like George W. Bush as an example. As again, speech scholar, I'll tell you that of the recording presidents that we have, W was the worst. I mean, he really was. He misspoke a lot in terms of pronunciation, articulation. His note system was strange. I'll talk about that as we get to notes. And then you've got Trump, who, by all standards of speech, He's a terrible speaker. He doesn't stay on topic. He just meanders here and there. When he does stay on topic, he uses a teleprompter and he reads it word for word. And he either doesn't read or see well, or both, because he stumbles and stammers. But somehow it works. People connect. I mean, not the majority, but about 30% of the public think he is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And a lot of that comes from his demeanor while he is speaking. So again, whether you love these people, hate these people, see them as evil or saintly, they use words in effective ways. And that's because words are powerful. And it doesn't have to be something massive. It doesn't have to be a big speech to be a powerful use of language. I mean, think about these little simple phrases that might have these huge meanings. First of all, you've got what you see there are trigger words / slurs. Now, not all trigger words are slurs, but all slurs are trigger words. And we all know what slurs are. It's, like a racial epithet. So if you call someone something based on their ethnicity, nationality, creed, religion, that sort of thing, that's a slur. We don't need to get examples of those because we know them and we know that we're not supposed to use those. Sometimes people will use them accidentally, and you don't get a pass on an accident for using, the N-word. But some people will still say things like, I got gypped on that deal. When you say that, you're basically saying gypped is short for gypsies, which is a slur term for the Romani. And gypsies are slurs that are aligned with theft. So you're saying that anyone who is Romani will steal from you when you say, I got gypped on that deal. I mean, it's something that if we realized what it meant, as now you do, we would never use it, because it would be like in the 1930s, 20s, people saying things like, I got Jewed on that. That's something we used to hear. We don't much anymore, if at all. I've never heard anyone, well, I grew up in West Virginia. I have heard a couple of people use that when I was a kid, but not in my adult life, right? No, I've not heard anyone use that. It's because it's inappropriate. And so those words we may not even think of could be triggers for people. And what that means, it's a word that creates a real sense of reaction inside of you. It makes you angry, or it just really, it gets you in a way that few other things do. Some people are even drawn to the point of violence when they hear these words. Hopefully that won't be the case, and we can just see that people are ignorant when they use these, but that's not always how that might work. For other folks, it could be something else. For me, it's I don't care. That's a trigger, I guess, phrase for me. If I'm talking to someone, not about a meal, oh, I don't care. That's different. But, so what do you think about this? What kind of approach can we use to make sure that your grade improves? Yeah, I don't care. Why the hell are you talking to me about it? If you don't care, I don't care. And if we don't care, then what are we doing here? Right? Let's do something else. My wife, for example, I'll point up, she's upstairs. Her trigger word is moist, right? Some people may hear that word and they're like, oh, just get you. It's strange around here. We'll talk about food, for example. And it's, boy, this sure is not dry. So these things vary from person to person. They can be as serious as a slur to as sort of trivial as some word about cooking. Big news can come in small packages. I think we all have experienced that. I mean, it could be good news or bad news. Someone proposing or telling you how they feel about you could just simply be, I love you. And that could be a huge life event, but it's still just a short word or phrase. It could be negative. It could be, things like you're fired, not on the TV show with the president, but you're a single parent, right? Living paycheck to paycheck, and your boss says you're fired. Your life just changed. Or God forbid, it's terminal. These sorts of things, right? So big news, small package, what we find is that these words are powerful in our lives. With relationships, it's the same way. I mean, we can think of examples of this, but each relationship, whether that's a friendship or a romantic relationship or whatnot, you have your own sort of little code on some level that you and that other person use to communicate with, whether that's an inside joke or it's being sort of facetious or something playful. it still impacts that relationship. And when you use that, your partner sees that, oh, that's our thing. And that can really invest in a relationship. Or if you choose not to use that same thing that your partner expects because that's your thing, that might hurt a relationship. So, words are powerful. They really are. They can change the world, they can change your life, they can change your day. And not only are they powerful, but Noam Chomsky, who's just a well-known social scientist, tells us that words package points of view. Think about that for just a second. Words package points of view. In other words, you are what you say, not what you say you are. Anybody can say they are anything, but you are what you say. So the ideas of things like racism or sexism, you don't have to go around, waving your rebel flag with your white hood on in order for us to know you're a racist. It could just be the things that you say. If you say racist things, guess what? You're labeled a racist. It's the way life works. Sexist, same thing. You don't have to go around, making slurs towards, the opposite sex or grabbing people as you walk by. People say sexist things, and that's how we know they're sexist. Same idea on the positive end, right? You're intelligent or kind. We don't need to see your transcripts, your GPA to know that you're intelligent. You say intelligent things. Those two things don't always line up, by the way. You might not have the best grades, but you still may be very intelligent. Same thing with being kind. You don't have to do me a favor for me to say, oh, what a nice person you are. I can tell that from the things that you talk about, right? And this is how we judge people in a good and appropriate way in our culture. It's based on what they say. Maya Angelou said, when people tell you who they are, believe them the first time. And again, it's not them telling us who they are and saying, oh, I'm a nice person and lying, but it's they show us who they are. And that's how they do that, is with their words. Okay. To move through the rest of this, words have the power to transfer knowledge. We've talked about the learning and telling stories to do this. This is using words to transfer knowledge. They have the power to change attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, and values. More on that later, but they sure absolutely do. They can make or break relationships. We've mentioned some examples of that. The classic one here for me, this romantic relationship. Think about this simple question. You walk in, you see your significant other sitting, maybe staring at a blank TV screen. You say to them 2 words, what's wrong? What's wrong? Real simple. They respond with an even more simplistic answer because it's only 1 word, nothing. Danger. It could be a trap. So if you hear someone say, oh, nothing, maybe they were just zoned out, they're tired. Okay, no problem. Maybe they say it like this. What's wrong? Nothing. Something's wrong. And I don't know how it works in your relationship. That's what you have to learn from knowing someone. But in mine, especially with my wife, it would be, something's wrong. I need you to ask me more questions about it so that I can see that you care, so that we can talk more. Right? We've been together all these years, and it's sort of, we still need to play the game sometimes. Now, what if someone answered that question with the same word, but they said it in a different way? Hey, what's wrong? Nothing. Shit. Something's wrong, and you did it. You should leave now or start apologizing. You don't even know what it's for yet, but you should go ahead and do that. So these simple questions, simple responses can be very powerful, making and breaking relationships. Now, when you think of public speaking, you may be thinking to yourself, Carl, you've been talking about sort of these interpersonal interactions that me and another person may have. And that's true. And that's because there are a lot of similarities between conversations and public speaking. And you see that in the next section there. You're going to logically organize your thought. You're going to adapt your message to your audience, and you're going to adapt to feedback. Basically, you're telling a story for maximum impact. Think about that. Most of the time, people will tell you something and they'll start at the beginning and finish at the end of the story. Some people can't do that. I'm sure you have a friend, it's not you, who you ask them how their weekend was, and they'll start in the middle of the day on Saturday, they'll jump back to Friday, they'll go back to Sunday, and come. It's hard to follow. Now, that's one of the differences between public speaking and conversations. It will be highly structured. with an outline in public speaking, but it's still the same basic idea of making sense to whoever you're speaking with. Adapting your message to your audience. Let's say that it's Sunday morning and you wake up with a terrible hangover headache. I'm sure you've never done that. And your best friend calls and they say, "Hey, what's going on?" You're like, "Oh my God, I want to die. I feel so terrible." And then you tell them why. What if it's your mom that calls and you're not comfortable sharing quite the same information? You say, "Oh, I feel terrible. My head really hurts." You might give them the same basic message, "I don't feel well," but the rest of that message is going to be tailored to that audience. Your best friend's going to get the real fun version, or at least what you remember of it, and your mom's going to get the, "Oh, maybe I got something that made me feel bad." "Yeah, you did. It was called alcohol," and it does that sometimes. So we adapt our stories. And we adapt to feedback too. If we see someone in a conversation give us the confused look, we might stop and clarify something. You should probably do that in a speech too. Now, we don't have a live audience, so we can't really take advantage of that one, but in most speaking situations, in person anyway, or even Zoom, you can potentially use that. Let's look at some other differences though between speaking and conversations. We talked about the structure. Another one is highly carefully chosen language. In a conversation, you can sometimes say something and your friend knows what you mean, or you can correct yourself and there's no hard feelings. In a speech, it's a little more high stakes. So you want to make sure you're using language that everyone understands and follows and that doesn't offend. And you also want to make sure that you're saying what you mean to say and that you're not misspeaking because you didn't plan those words carefully. So it will really just require some preparation. And similarly, it will require a focus on delivery, the effective verbal and nonverbal delivery of a message. And that also comes through the preparation and the practice. So what about ethics? When you think about it, any presentation, just briefly here, hang with me. We have to be ethical. What does that mean? First, it just means that you have to be honest. You can be creative, but you have to be honest. You can't tell someone that something is the case if it's not. And you also can't do things like tell us the right solution to a problem is to do something illegal, right? You can't do that. I had a student once ask me, I used to do a demonstration speech when I was at a different university. And the one student wanted to give me a speech on how to roll the perfect joint. And they asked if they could do this speech. And I said, "No, you can't." And they looked at me like, "What? I thought you were cool." And I'm like, yeah. Hey, I get it. But let's do how to roll the perfect hand-rolled cigarette. And we don't have to worry about what's in the middle. It's the same speech. And your audience can fill the gap to go from tobacco to weed. But, it's something that you have to be ethical about. Make sure that what you're asking people to do or telling them how to do is legal. Make sure that you're not attacking people. You can attack their views, but not them. We do have free speech, but free speech is not consequence free, or the right to say something doesn't make it right to say something. And of course, avoiding plagiarism is an ethical choice. The rest of this, I'll just say that we're going to basically give informative and persuasive speeches. We're going to use an extemporaneous style, so it's not going to be, something you write out and read. It's not going to be something you memorize. It's not going to be on the spot. And last but not least, when you think about your audience, that's going to that's part of this. When you think about the goal for a message, for a speech, and what you really want to get across, think about all of these different items here. What's your audience? What do they need to know, want to know? What do they already know? All right, next time we will talk about anxiety. What I will show you also on here, we've got the public speaking empowerment scale I talked about. There's a copy of it and a copy of the PRCA 24, which this is just the public speaking section. There's normally 24 questions. This is just the ones about public speaking. If you want to, you can go in and fill these out. Take screenshots of them or copy paste them into another document. and then upload that into Blackboard, and I would love to get your information on it. But if not, it's not a requirement. Next time, speech anxiety, you see it there coming up. It's nervous is normal, and we'll talk about that next. All right, if you have questions, as always, let me know. Email me, and I will respond to you directly. And again, as always, I'll make an announcement if it's something that is useful for the entire group. All right, have a good week. Stay safe, wear your masks, and I'll see you next time.